So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like first to thank very much the organizing committee who has been so kind to invite me here on this auspicious conference. And today I will be talking about coupling between swelling and fracture, and with particular reference to biological tissues. I have so many co-authors, but I think I didn't mention any of them here on the slide. But I'm going to talk about a pretty wide range of applications. One is biological tissues, the other is hydrogels, and the third one is shale. And all of them will relate to the coupling between swelling and fracture. So applications we are thinking of is biological tissue. Biological tissue, as already mentioned by the first speaker, is mainly water. Now, it may be surprising that we are composed mainly of water, considering that we appear like solids. Why do we appear like solids while our body is mainly composed of water? The reason for this is that most of the water is bound. And this binding is done on osmosis, so osmosis due to ionized molecules inside the body. And you find an example of this in intervertebral disc, which is typically a swelling material absorbing very much water. But there are many more examples than only these. And we do also a very important project in the field of diapers together with P&G. And there we study hydrogels, but you can think also of shale being also a swelling material which is ionized with ionized molecules which bind counter ions, and these counter ions bind water. So all of these applications have in common that interfacial phenomena between solid and fluid are extremely important for the whole phenomenon of swelling and deformation in these tissues. So I have many co-authors, mathematicians, mechanical engineers, experts in XFEM and optics, etc., etc. So I will not go into all of the details of it, but these are all of this relates basically to the work that I'm doing in Eindhoven. And most of these people have been working in Eindhoven for this project. Now, these days, I am moving towards Bernal Institute in Limerick, and this is the construction which is going on. It's actually a research center of about 400 people, which are going to be set up there, and double the capacity of engineering there. And I will work also on interfacial phenomena in that group. To give you kind of an idea how swelling goes into action, this is a simple experiment. We just took a hydrogel, cylindrical hydrogel, and it is made black in order to make sure that you can see it, but normally it would be transparent. And if you move it from one salt solution to, oh no. So if you move it from a high salt concentration to a low salt concentration, what happens is that it starts swelling. But while it is actually a perfectly symmetric structure, which is typically homogeneous and isotropic, you find that it develops surface instabilities. And why? Because the outside swells first, and the inside needs more time to swell. And as it goes on, you see that a saddle shape develops. So a curvature in this direction within the surface of the screen, and a curvature in the other direction, concave upward in the other perpendicular direction. So this develops only because the inside doesn't swell as fast as the outside. And what happens actually during the swelling is that water goes in, and at the same time there is a competition against the water because ions want to go out. So two movements are going on at the same time, and different time constants play a role in this phenomenon. And you see that as the swelling goes on, slowly the material returns to its original shape, namely to the cylindrical shape, but say a factor 2 or 3 or 5 higher. Typically, if you think of diapers and female pads, the swelling is in the order of a factor 30, so it's even more than what is happening here. So you see it's slowly going back to the original case. Now, this is the situation of a flexible hydrogel. Now, we can think also of situations where we add a lot of cross-linker to make actually the material much more stiff. And this is the case in hydrogels which are cross-linked, but also in the case of shale. In that case, you will get not a nice smooth swelling like here, but you will get a swelling material which actually fractures. So this is the same experiment, and this time we added some mirror to actually see two views of them. And you see that as it goes into swelling, it starts fracturing to pieces without any external load, just on the basis of chemical loading. So changing the salt concentration, and what you get is a situation where the material fractures. Now, going back to the PowerPoint presentation. Now, how do we model this? We model this by means of a 4-component model. One is an ionized solid, a solid which is negatively charged. Water, obviously, because this is the main component, is maybe 80–90% of the material. And we have cations and we have anions. And the assumption is that the whole material is electroneutral. So there is as many positive as negative, but because there are two components which are negative, namely the anions are negatively charged, but also the solid is negatively charged, there is a different concentration between anions and cations everywhere. And for simplicity, we just assume isothermal behavior, incompressibility, constancy of ionization, so no chemical reactions going on, and negligible acceleration and gravitation. So the equations that we get is basically a balance of momentum, balance of mass. For each of the components, we have these ones, and this is a Lagrangian approach using a Lagrangian fluxes, 3 of them, because you have the one for fluid, for cations and anions, and you have balance of mass of the whole mixture. This whole analysis is done in finite deformation, and so we have a second Piola-Kirchhoff stress, which is a derivative of free energy with respect to Green-Lagrange strain, like in standard in finite deformation. Only you see that this free energy can depend on salt concentration and on water concentration. So this Mi is actually specifying the salt concentration. And you can actually show that this term plays explicitly a role in gels and in cartilage. You have here the pressure term. The pressure term is quite standard. Electrochemical potentials are pretty standard, but you see that reappearing the same W, which you use for elasticity, you see it appearing in the electrochemical potential. So there is a strong coupling between, on the one hand, the electrical phenomena and the chemical phenomena, and on the other hand, the elasticity. So all of these can appear on both sides. Meaning, for instance, that gels can actually function as mechanotransducers. So they can translate mechanical load into electrical. Why? Because if this Mi appears explicitly here, the stress is going to depend on salt concentration, but if this E, this strain, appears in electrochemical potential, the electrochemical potential is going to depend on strain, and we actually can show that this is the case. Friction is basically a coupling between Darcy's equation, Fick's equation, and Ohm's equation, all of this brought into one big matrix kind of formula. Now we do mixed hybrid formulation. That means we have displacement unknown on the corners, and then we define fluxes in the style of Javier Thomas, and we have fluxes through the sides. We require actually those fluxes, both ionic fluxes as water fluxes, are strictly local mass conserving, so that means the flux going out of one element is equal to the flux going into the next element. And we assemble our system this way that we can actually eliminate the fluxes element by element and be left in the whole system of equations only with displacements and those three Lagrange multipliers that we use to get these fluxes strictly mass conserving. It is lambda f, lambda plus, and lambda minus. So we can actually do a comparison between experiment and analytical solution and numerical simulation. This is for the situation of free swelling. So we contact a 1D domain with a sudden change in salt concentration, and what happens is the material swells. You have changes in electrochemical potential, electrical potential, pressure, etc., concentrations. All of these are changing at the same time, and we can reasonably catch this using mixed hybrid finite elements. Using the regular UP formulation, it didn't work this way. Same thing for consolidation. You apply a load, and then you can actually follow all of these variations of different quantities within the medium. Now, we can do also 3D simulation. This is an eighth of a sphere. We change the salt concentration from the outside, and what you see is swelling. Now, notice that the deformation is not completely spherically symmetric. But basically, you could see that the deformation is not strictly spherical symmetric, showing that there is some asymmetry developing. Only coming to the point of the experiment, we don't manage to do it. Now, in terms of fracture, we've been thinking about introducing fracture into this model. Why? Because it is very relevant for shale. Shale is typically a material where we have hydraulic fracturing, and we want to be able to model this. But also in diapers. In diapers, you may not know, but there is a lot of fracture going on in diapers as well. And there is fracture in cartilage, which can cause us quite a bit of trouble as we grow old. So this is XFEM approach. XFEM approach, we can actually do an enrichment of nodes around the fracture and actually make sure that we can actually propagate the fracture through the elements. And we're going to do this for a poroelastic material which is swelling. This is a mode 2 calculation where we have actually both discontinuous pressure, or chemical potential, I should say, and displacement, and we have an initial fracture here, and we're going to push from this side and cause a mode 2 fracture along this line. And so this calculation results in a graph representing the tip of the crack going forward, and also you can actually visualize the flow across the vault, because this vault is not only a fracture, it's also a surface through which fluid is flowing. Now, what was our great surprise here, and we've been discussing this a lot with many people, but especially with Bernard Schreffler, is that we found out that the crack propagates in a stepwise fashion. It propagates in a stepwise fashion as soon as you include fluids. You don't need swelling, but you do need the fluid, and you find that it goes in a stepwise fashion, and you see sudden changes in flow, demonstrating that the stepwise propagation is due to the presence of the fluid. Basically, what happens is that as this crack is propagating, the load, which is originally on the right-hand side and distributes over the whole sample beyond this crack, this side is going to be loaded suddenly, and the extra load is first taken up by the fluid and not the solid. And as the fluid never cracks, only the solid can crack, you get a protective effect of this fluid against cracking. Now this protection comes in, but only temporarily, because this tensile traction within the fluid causes fluid flow. And as the fluid flow takes place, you get propagation. You get propagation, and again, you get protective effect of the fluid and transfer of force from the fluid to the solid, etc. In this way, actually, progressively, the fracture goes forward, and you get each time this fluid flow going on actually to redistribute the load from the fluid towards the solid. We've done mode 1 also, and also in mode 1 we found similar effect, where we have opening of the crack, we have fluid from the crack into the formation, we have fluid within the crack, and here we took actually originally a displacement which is discontinuous, and a pressure which is continuous but enriched with some extra functions in order to be able to account for the steep gradients of pressure along the side of the crack. We use cohesive zone as a fracture model, and then we get results which relate to fluid flow, through fluid flow, and this is the fluid x direction, flow in the x direction, flow in the y direction, and the chemical potential, and we can actually simulate propagation of cracks within a poroelastic medium, and in this case I think no swelling was included. Now we found also their stepwise progression, and we've been actually doing experiments. This is a hydrogel which we have been subjecting to traction, and there was an initial crack here ready, and you see it propagating, and what happens if you look at the crack surface afterwards, you can actually see that indeed the crack propagates in a stepwise fashion through this gel, although we have the feeling like this gel should be homogeneous. Now, we have no hard proof of this, but there is all reason to think that the gel is pretty homogeneous. Now, this provides some evidence of the fact that it may be actually a real thing and not just a theory. So you see here this propagating crack within the gel. You can actually see that there is a relationship between the step size of the crack propagation and the Young's modulus. As you take it more stiff, the step size becomes larger. We did also a crack propagation within a swelling medium, and here a very simple configuration, but we changed the external salt concentration. We could actually show that the crack propagates just based on a change in salt concentration. And these are further pictures of the same thing. Now, these analysis showed a separate code for mode 2 and one for mode 1. Now, we've been thinking how to handle hydraulic fracturing for mixed mode, mode 1 and mode 2. Now, the problem that we encountered is the following, is that as you go to lower permeability, and typically shale is very low permeability and gel is very low permeability as well, the steepness of the pressure along the crack is very high steepness, so high that we need to do mesh refinement around the crack. Now, the advantage of XFEM, typically, what is it? It is that you can take a rough mesh. Now, if you start using a fine mesh around the crack, you're basically losing your advantage of XFEM. So we launched actually the idea to include steps of pressure between the crack and the surrounding. Instead of taking a continuous variation of pressure, we took for the pressure exactly the same expression as for the displacement. So a jump in pressure from one side to the crack to the next. And on top of this, we used a separate 1D mesh along the crack, which represents the pressure in the crack. The pressure in the crack, the pressure left of the crack, pressure right of the crack, all three are different. Now, this formulation actually has the major advantage that you can keep your rough mesh and still simulate very steep gradients of pressure. Now, what we do, in fact, is a separation of scales, where we just assume that the steepness of the gradient in pressure is so high that this first layer can be modeled separately using analytical solution, and that once we are further away from the crack, we actually use our finite element simulation. And we use the identical solution to actually evaluate the flow from the crack into the formation. This approach seemed to be very useful in low permeability media. And to demonstrate this, this is a borehole with two initial cracks, one vertical and one horizontal. And this is the whole configuration as it is. We have a pre-stress, an initial stress in the horizontal direction, in the vertical direction. Horizontal direction is twice as high as in the vertical direction. And we simulate the increase in pressure inside our borehole. And then what happens? Here, this is a situation of just one crack vertically. And these are two cracks, one here and one there. And you can see actually how they propagate. This one propagates horizontally. This vertical crack does not propagate. And this one propagates first vertically and turns to horizontal. And this is, it turns out that if you use these discontinuous pressures, you get a much more stable behavior, also when the permeability is very low. So conclusion, I would like to say that finite swelling of gel gives rise to spontaneous symmetry breaking. Finite deformation of gels are analyzed using mixed hybrid finite element analysis, Rabi-Atoma type elements of quadriphasic mechanics. Analytical solutions are used to validate the solution procedure. A simplified version of a quadriphasic equation is Lanier's model of osmoelasticity, the one which used for fracture, assuming drained ionic phases. We have XFEM crack propagation, which is implemented with Lanier's model of swelling in a poroelastic medium. Stepwise progression of mode 1 crack propagation is observed in gels, and enhanced local pressure is a must for XFEM crack propagation in a low permeability medium such as shale. And actually, in 2 days, Bernard Scheffler is going to present more about this, suggesting that even discontinuous should be taken along the length of the crack. But this will be in 2 days, I think, in the competing conference. I will keep it with this. I think these are my sponsors, quite a number of them, both from the side of Geo as from the side of Bio. So thank you very much, and this was it.